In the world of the bold and the beautiful, the most destructive storms rarely announce themselves with thunder. They begin quietly, with small misunderstandings, misplaced loyalties, and promises that feel sincere in the moment but are already doomed by the emotions simmering beneath them. The events unfolding ahead of Friday's episode reveal a tapestry of such moments, where restraint and desire, truth and concealment, collide in ways that feel both inevitable and tragic. At the heart of it all are people trying desperately to preserve boundaries they no longer truly believe in, while sensing, sometimes too late, that the walls they defend are already cracking. Dylan stands at the center of this fragile balance, carrying the weight of regret from a night that should have been insignificant yet has become charged with consequence. Her continued apologies over what happened with Will are not simply about manners or social harmony. They are driven by a deeper anxiety, a fear that she has already crossed an invisible line and that acknowledging this truth would force her to confront feelings she would rather deny. Dylan's remorse is sincere, but sincerity alone does not erase the pull she feels toward Will. Nor does it calm the unease growing inside Elektra, who senses that something fundamental has shifted. What began as something almost absurdly trivial, a plate of teriyaki chicken, a small act of accommodation after Will's gentle insistence, has taken on a symbolic weight far heavier than the meal itself. To Elektra, that moment was not about food. It was about territory, intimacy, and the subtle ways people test boundaries before admitting they intend to cross them. Seeing Dylan accept what belonged to her felt like witnessing the first step in a pattern she has learned to fear, where kindness becomes entitlement and closeness turns into intrusion. Elektra's reaction, on the surface, appears disproportionate, yet beneath it lies a lifetime of instincts honed by disappointment and loss. Elektra's anger is fueled not only by Dylan's actions but by her own vulnerability. She has opened her space, physically and emotionally, to someone she trusted, and now she worries that generosity has been mistaken for permission. The near insistence that Dylan stay with her and Will was meant to be supportive. An act of friendship extended without calculation. But generosity can curdle into resentment when it begins to feel exploited. And Elektra now fears that Dylan's presence has lingered beyond what was ever intended. Her frustration is less about Dylan overstaying her welcome and more about the realization that she may have invited chaos into a carefully structured life. Dylan, for her part, responds with reassurance, promising to do better, to respect boundaries, to recognize the invisible lines Elektra is drawing ever more firmly. Her vow on Friday carries the weight of destiny precisely because it feels fragile. Dylan wants to believe in the version of herself who can remain within limits, who can honor Elektra's warnings without resentment or temptation. Yet even as she makes this promise, there is an unspoken acknowledgement that her feelings toward Will are not fading. They are intensifying, fueled by proximity, shared moments, and the forbidden thrill of emotional risk. Elektra's warning that the previous night must never be repeated is not merely a rule but a plea. An attempt to freeze time before irreparable damage is done. She wants Dylan to understand that trust, once broken, cannot be easily restored, and that friendships often fracture not because of betrayal alone but because of the slow erosion caused by unspoken desires. Dylan's affirmation that she understands sounds convincing, yet it is laced with inevitability. Some promises are made not because they can be kept, but because acknowledging their impossibility would shatter the illusion of control. The irony is that Elektra's instincts, which she herself may dismiss as overreaction, are likely correct. She senses that Dylan's presence is not neutral, that something within Dylan is already leaning toward a future where restraint gives way to impulse. The existing barriers around Will are not as solid as they appear. And Dylan's emotional proximity makes a bold move feel less like a betrayal and more like an overdue confession. In this context, the friendship between Elektra and Dylan begins to feel unsustainable, not because either woman is inherently cruel, but because they are standing on opposite sides of an emotional fault line that is already shifting. While these personal tensions simmer, another storm gathers elsewhere, quieter but equally dangerous. Finn's visit to Il Giardino is marked by an intention to avoid trouble. Yet his choice of location betrays an inner conflict he cannot fully escape. Knowing that Sheila works there and hoping to remain unseen reflects Finn's ongoing struggle between responsibility and avoidance. He understands that some confrontations carry consequences far beyond discomfort. Yet fate, or perhaps subconscious impulse, draws him directly into the path he wishes to avoid. The awkwardness of Finn's encounter with Sheila is inevitable, not simply because of their shared history, but because Finn is burdened with knowledge he cannot reveal. He is aware of the complex emotions surrounding Deacon and Taylor, and this awareness turns every word, every glance, into a calculated act of concealment. When Sheila praises Taylor for saving her marriage, Finn is forced into silence, swallowing truths that threaten to unravel multiple lives if spoken aloud. His restraint is not an act of cowardice, but a desperate attempt to prevent a chain reaction he fears cannot be stopped once begun. This moment underscores Finn's internal fracture. He wants to protect Steffi, to honor the trust she has placed in him by keeping sensitive information contained. Yet he also knows that silence can be as destructive as honesty when it allows dangerous dynamics to grow unchecked. Watching Sheila celebrate a narrative that Finn knows is incomplete feels like complicity. And the discomfort it causes him is amplified by the knowledge that Sheila has never been a passive figure in the lives she touches. The tension in that conversation is not spoken, but it lingers heavily, shaping Finn's every reaction. Steffi's concern looms over this situation like a warning bell that refuses to stop ringing. She has already voiced her fears about Deacon and Taylor, understanding that their connection carries risks far greater than either seems willing to acknowledge. Steffi's frustration lies in feeling unheard. In watching people she cares about dismiss caution as pessimism. Her updates to Finn are not just informational, they are an expression of helplessness. A plea for vigilance in a situation where optimism feels dangerously naive. Her subsequent discussion with Hope reflects this divide in perception. Hope's belief that Deacon and Taylor could work as a couple is rooted in faith in growth and redemption, in the idea that people can transcend their past mistakes. Steffi, however, views this optimism as a liability, one that ignores patterns too consistent to be dismissed. Their differing perspectives are not simply about Deacon and Taylor, but about how each woman understands risk, forgiveness, and the cost of being wrong. The looming confrontation between Taylor, Deacon, and Sheila promises to bring these tensions to a breaking point. When truths collide with denial, and long-standing grudges resurface, the fallout is rarely contained. Sheila, whose history is defined by volatility and manipulation, is unlikely to accept being sidelined or deceived without resistance. The brewing conflict suggests not just an argument, but a reckoning, one that will force each character to confront the consequences of their choices. Across these intertwined storylines, a unifying theme emerges: the danger of underestimating intuition. Elektra senses betrayal before it occurs. Steffi senses disaster before it unfolds. Finn senses the weight of truths that refuse to remain hidden. Each character is standing at the edge of a revelation, struggling with whether to act or to wait, whether to trust their instincts or silence them for the sake of temporary peace. In the end, the tension driving these events is not rooted in malice but in human frailty. Promises are made with genuine intent, yet compromised by desire. Silence is maintained for protection, yet breeds misunderstanding. Boundaries are declared, yet tested by longing. As Friday's episode approaches, it becomes clear that the calm many characters seek is an illusion, sustained only by denial and hope. When the barriers finally fall, and they will, the damage will not be limited to romantic entanglements or fractured friendships. It will ripple outward, reshaping alliances and redefining trust. The question is no longer whether conflict will erupt, but who will be left standing when the truths everyone has tried to contain finally demand to be heard. And when that moment comes, the most devastating realization may not be who crossed the line first, but how many people saw it coming and still chose to believe they could stop it. The universe of the bold and the beautiful has always thrived on contradictions. Love that disguises control, loyalty that breeds rivalry, and protection that quietly transforms into possession. The latest unfolding events do not explode into chaos all at once. Instead, they advance through subtle shifts in behavior, through instincts that flare before facts emerge, and through emotional reactions that reveal far more than any confession ever could. What appears on the surface as jealousy, concern, or family disagreement is, at its core, a deeper struggle over identity, belonging, and power within one of Los Angeles' most influential families. Elektra Forrester's transformation begins almost imperceptibly, yet it is unmistakable once it takes shape. Having only recently allowed herself to be swept into the excitement of attraction toward R.J. Forrester, Elektra suddenly finds herself awakened to a vulnerability she neither anticipated nor fully understands. Love, or even the possibility of it, destabilizes her sense of control. Where confidence once guided her interactions, instinct now takes the wheel, and instinct tells her that territory must be defended before it is taken. It is in this emotional state that Elektra directs her attention toward Will Spencer. Convinced that Dylan is pursuing him, the accusation itself says less about Dylan's actual behavior and far more about Elektra's internal fear. Elektra does not need evidence to feel threatened. The mere presence of another woman receiving attention is enough to awaken a sense of scarcity. Her possessiveness, though abrupt, is not irrational within the emotional logic she inhabits. Having just tasted connection, she fears losing it before it has even solidified. Will, however, exists in a different emotional register. Oblivious to the undercurrents Elektra perceives. He remains convinced that no lines have been crossed and no intentions misread. To him, Dylan has never been anything more than courteous, friendly, and professionally respectful. His instinct is to defend Dylan, not because of romantic attachment, but because fairness matters to him. Yet Will is also acutely aware of Elektra's feelings, and this awareness introduces a quiet conflict within him. He does not want to dismiss Elektra's emotions, nor does he want to validate a suspicion he does not believe to be true. This places Will in the familiar soap opera position of emotional mediator, attempting to preserve harmony by making compromises that satisfy no one completely. His decision to prioritize Elektra's happiness, even if it means altering his own behavior around Dylan, reveals a subtle but important shift. It is not love that motivates him, but responsibility. He understands that emotional security often matters more than objective truth, and in choosing to reassure Elektra, he inadvertently reinforces the very possessiveness she struggles to control. Meanwhile, Dylan remains largely unaware of the role she has been assigned in this unspoken drama. Her presence becomes symbolic rather than factual, a projection of Elektra's guilt and envy rather than a reflection of Dylan's intent. Dylan's proximity to Will, coupled with her visibility at Forrester Creations, turns her into a lightning rod for emotions Elektra is unwilling to confront directly. It is not Dylan's actions that trouble Elektra most, but the ease with which attention seems to flow toward her. Elektra's internal conflict deepens when she recognizes the contradiction in her own behavior. Only days earlier, she had indulged in flirtation with RJ, embracing freedom and spontaneity without regard for boundaries. Now, she demands those same boundaries be rigidly enforced by others. The rules, in her mind, apply selectively. This hypocrisy does not escape her awareness, and it manifests as irritation, suspicion, and defensiveness. She is not simply protecting her territory. She is attempting to silence the guilt that accompanies her desire to have more than she fears she deserves. Her status as a Forrester only complicates this dynamic further. The family legacy is built not only on fashion, but on entitlement, expectation, and the belief that control is synonymous with stability. Elektra, whether consciously or not, begins to embody these values. Her possessiveness mirrors the family's historic approach to love and loyalty, where relationships are guarded as assets and perceived threats are neutralized swiftly. As Elektra shares her concerns with Will, she does so from a place of certainty that borders on paranoia. She interprets Will's politeness as vulnerability, his kindness as weakness, and Dylan's presence as strategy rather than circumstance. Will may not believe her conclusions, but he believes in her emotional reality enough to adjust his behavior. In doing so, he creates the illusion that her fears are justified, even as he attempts to calm them. This fragile equilibrium is unlikely to hold. Dylan's continued presence at Forrester Creations ensures that avoidance will never be complete. And Elektra's growing anxiety suggests that she will not remain passive indefinitely. The possibility that Elektra might orchestrate moments designed to expose Dylan, or even manufacture situations that place Will and RJ in emotionally charged proximity, becomes increasingly plausible. Her jealousy is no longer dormant, it is active, strategic, and evolving. While these personal tensions simmer, a far more dangerous deception unfolds elsewhere, one with consequences that extend far beyond bruised egos and fractured friendships. The collective effort to conceal the truth from Sheila Carter regarding Deacon Sharp and Taylor Hayes is a ticking time bomb. History has proven that Sheila does not tolerate exclusion or manipulation, and the belief that she can be kept in the dark indefinitely is dangerously naive. Hope Logan and Deacon's daughter, often guided by optimism and emotional reasoning, fail to grasp the magnitude of the mistake they have made in pushing Deacon away from her. Their regret emerges too late, only after they begin to sense the shift in Deacon's emotional center of gravity. Encouraged by his children, Deacon finds himself drawn more deeply toward Taylor, not as an act of rebellion, but as a search for validation and peace. The tragedy lies in the miscalculation. Hope and Deacon believed that separation would restore balance, that distance would clarify feelings. Instead, it created a vacuum that Taylor naturally filled. Deacon's increasing emotional investment in Taylor is not impulsive. It is nurtured, encouraged, and affirmed by those who claim to want what is best for him. Yet this closeness places Taylor squarely in Sheila's path, whether she realizes it or not. When Sheila inevitably steps away, sensing exclusion or betrayal, Steffi Forrester Finnegan reacts with instinctive alarm. Steffi's concern for her mother eclipses any sympathy she might have for Hope's intentions. To Steffi, the situation is clear. Hope's inability to control Deacon has endangered Taylor. This belief becomes the catalyst for a renewed and intensified conflict between the Logan and Forrester families. Steffy does not merely revive an old rivalry, she reframes it. This time, the battle is not about business dominance or romantic rivalry, but about accountability and protection. Steffy positions herself as her mother's defender, convinced that Hope's idealism has crossed into negligence. Her anger is not performative. It is fueled by fear, history, and the unshakable belief that Sheila's involvement never ends without collateral damage. The resulting confrontation promises to reignite the Logan-Forrester war with renewed ferocity. Each side believes itself morally justified, each convinced that the other has underestimated the danger. Hope, in her insistence that Deacon and Taylor could work, unknowingly places herself in Steffy's crosshairs. Steffy's wrath is not abstract, it is focused, personal, and unrelenting. As these narratives converge, a single truth becomes impossible to ignore. Intuition, when dismissed, becomes prophecy. Elektra's jealousy, Steffy's warnings, Hope's optimism, and Deacon's longing all spiral toward outcomes none of them can fully control. Every attempt to protect, to conceal, or to preserve ultimately accelerates the very chaos it seeks to prevent. The future of these relationships will not be determined by grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but by the cumulative weight of small choices made in fear, insecurity, and love. Boundaries will be crossed not because they were invisible, but because acknowledging them would require sacrifice. And when the truth finally surfaces, as it always does in the world of the bold and the beautiful, it will not ask who was right or wrong. It will only ask who was willing to face it first, and who waited too long, believing that silence could keep a storm at bay.
Oh.